scripture reading comes from John chapter 15, verses 9 through 17, and you can find it on page 103. As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. I have said these things to you, so that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be complete. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. No one has greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command you. I do not call you servants any longer, because the servant does not know what the master is doing. But I have called you friends, because I have made known to you everything that I have heard from my Father. You did not choose me, but I chose you, and I appointed you to go and bear fruit, fruit that will last, so that the Father will give you whatever you ask him in my name. I am giving you these commandments so that you may love one another. This is the story of faith and faithful struggle. Thanks be to God.
Let's be in a spirit of prayer. Gracious and loving God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of each one of our hearts be acceptable to you, our rock and our Redeemer. And may we, like Samuel, cry out and say, "Speak, Lord," for we are listening. Amen. We're continuing along in our series, our January series about resolutions, about changing for the better. Remembering, as I mentioned last week, that God doesn't want a whole new person. God just wants us to be the best we can be. So there is change, there is transformation that's going on, but we don't have to become somebody who we're not. And that's an important point today as we consider what it means to be a friend. What do we consider that it means to be able to be completely yourself in the presence of someone who knows who you really are? You may remember that in our first week we talked a little bit about covenant. We talked a little bit about how God has what's called a suzerain covenant with we, God's people. A covenant where he, God, has all the power and we are the recipients of immeasurable grace. But today, when we talk about friendship, we're talking about being more equal, having a relationship of mutuality with someone else, where we understand that we are equal. We sometimes share in different ways, but we each bring something to the equation. So last week we talked a lot about our image, not our body image necessarily, but ourselves as images of God, and not allowing ourselves to be subject to identity theft, but remembering whose we truly are. And next week, when we finish the series, we'll be talking a little bit about goal setting, a little bit about how to proceed from here, putting things in order. I mentioned in the announcements that today is Human Relations Sunday. It is the Sunday that falls closest to Martin Luther King's Day. It's a day when we remember our equality with others. And so it's important, I think, when we're thinking about friendships being on equal footing, about laying down the places where we have power in our lives and allowing others to enter into relationship with us. One of the most common resolutions there is to spend more time with family and friends. Maybe you've made that resolution yourself, wanting to spend more time. Throughout this series, I've been talking about resolutions as opportunities to focus our intention and our attention on things. So our intention, not things happening just by happenstance or haphazardly, but with focus. With focus, that things that we're designed, we're investing in, and our attention being on God. You might remember the illustration I used last week of God being like the cover on a jigsaw puzzle, that model that we look to when we put the pieces of our lives together. And you've probably seen this little image that Lynn has prepared for us, this idea of peanut butter and jelly going together. It's such a beautiful image of friendship, different, distinct, but going together, complementing one another. There was a movie called Forrest Gump where Forrest says he and his friend Jenny are like peas and carrots. He recognized that there were differences, there were distinctions, but that they went together. So I think that that is what friendship is, where we can complement one another, where we can lift each other up in places where one is weak, the other is strong, by focusing our intention and our attention on these things, that intention with purpose and design. I have a friend that I met when I was the supervisor at the clinics, the legal clinics up at the law school here in town. His name was Andy, and he came from Alaska, and he was a law student, and he was a Mormon. And so I thought, well, we don't have very much in common at all then. We're completely different religions, we're different genders, we're from different places, we have different professions. But it turned out that Andy and I had an awful lot in common. And as we talked, he was one of my work-study students, which meant that he was working as a receptionist in the clinic, even while he was a law student. And so I was his supervisor during that time, and we spent a lot of time in the same office. And we would talk, and it was really easy to talk to him. And I wondered why. Why would these two people from such diverse backgrounds have so much in common? And as I examined it, it turned out that we were born in the same year, and we had been raised both in sort of religious households, so we had a lot of cultural things that were similar to us, the morals that we had, and the Disney movies that we watched, those ones with Fox and Hound, the live action ones that were so many years ago. But it was really easy to be myself with Andy. It just felt free. And I think good relationships are like that. And that's how they start, maybe. But what keeps good relationships going is paying attention to them, treating them with intention, right? Watering them, nurturing them, giving them of our time and our energy. When we say no, and we should say no to certain volunteer commitments when we don't feel capable and we don't feel we have time for them, but when we say no, we're usually making an assertion that this thing is more valuable than this thing to us. There's more need for this thing in our lives. When I first entered seminary, it was a time when my son Josh was still pretty young. And because there's so many years between Christina and Josh, she was off at college while he was at home, and I was his playmate. But being in seminary and working and doing things for the church, I didn't always have time to sit down and be his playmate. And he would ask, and I would find myself saying no, which broke my heart. And so as I examined that, I realized that I needed to nurture this relationship, this friendship between mother and son. I needed to invest myself in it. I needed to give it time. And my work ethic is such that I would get all of my work and my homework and my studies done, and then I could do something fun. But this time, that was all flipped on its head, because I realized that the time that Josh was available was early in the day, and that when he wasn't, he would be sleeping, I could be doing homework later at night. So I needed to flip my priorities around, or recognize the true priority, which was my relationship with him, and set the other thing aside, knowing that it would still get done. It would still have my best effort. It was just at a different time of the day. And so I began saying yes to Josh, to playing Star Wars Monopoly or playing Legos on the floor. And you know what the result is? That I have cultivated a friendship. I have a 22-year-old now who, when I ask, can you play with me, will play with me. Relationships are like that. They need water. Relationships are also strong. Sometimes we cannot have seen someone for a very long time and come together and just pick right up where we left off, because we've taken the time to cultivate that trust. I have friends like that too. I hope you do as well. That you can go without seeing them for a long time and then come together and they are right there. When I was looking through the scriptures today to see what other wonderful verses there were about friendship, I came across a proverb. It's Proverb 27, and it says this: "A sweet friendship refreshes the soul." Isn't that lovely? That's something I like to consider on my Sabbath day, the one day I take off during the week to be close to God. And the way I do that, the way I'm close to God on my Sabbath day, is usually somehow acknowledging creation. Either I'm spending time out in God's creation, hiking and enjoying the wonder of all that has been created here, or being creative myself. And so when I spend time like that, it nurtures my soul. And so you can say that those times with friends are Sabbath moments as well, times when you're refreshing your soul, and friends are perfect to do just that. There's also a lovely passage from Colossians that says this: "Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Bear with each other and forgive one another. If any of you has a grievance against someone, forgive as the Lord forgave you. And over all these virtues put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity." That idea of bearing with each other is so important. It reminds me of the scripture that Kelly read when in John it says, "I abide in you. I abide in God, and even as that is true, you abide here in the vine." That sense of abiding, of being present. I hope that when we are friends to each other, we are present to each other in those times when folks are hurting the most, abiding with them, being present with them. That develops this idea of intimacy, this mutuality, this being present for each other that's so important. There were so many biblical friendships that were beautiful. The friendship between David and Jonathan, that between Paul and Timothy, and another familial friendship between Naomi and Ruth. Even though they were in-laws, they were friends together. They knew they could trust one another. And cultivating that trust is what God is calling us to. Sometimes when I prepare a sermon, I think, oh my goodness, it's about relationship again. Oh my goodness, it's about relationship again. But I really think that's what it's all about. I really think that's what God is calling us to, both a relationship with God, that vertical relationship, that divine relationship, and that horizontal relationship with each other, to love each other as we want to be loved, right? And in that John passage too, we read that the true friend lays down that friend's life for his friends. I know that I presided over the funeral of Clarence Ashland this past week, and we did the military honors at the Veterans Cemetery. And I'm always so mindful of what that passage means to soldiers, actually laying down their lives to save others. But in the same sense, I know that us laying down our lives for our friends means putting things on hold, me putting my homework on hold to spend time with Josh, sometimes just laying aside whatever's on our mind so we can be present to the other person, listening carefully to them. There are other friendships in the Bible, but especially this one in this particular Bible passage today, where Jesus says, "You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you so that you might go and bear fruit that will last, and so that whatever you ask in my name, the Father will give you also." Lovely idea of friendship in Jesus. Even at those times when we feel we are all alone, we can know that Jesus is our friend. You know, Abraham Lincoln was someone who felt like there weren't a lot of people necessarily that were going to be around to be his friend in the end. Throughout his administration, Lincoln was a president under fire, especially during the scarring years of the Civil War. And though he knew he would make errors of office, he resolved never to compromise his integrity. So strong was this resolve that he once said, "I desire so to conduct the affairs of this administration that if at the end, when I come to lay down the reins of power, I have lost every other friend on earth, I shall have at least one friend left, and that friend shall be down inside of me. Can you imagine acting with such integrity that you could remain a friend to yourself? I think that idea of self-knowledge is one that we find in our faith stories too. When we understand to be ourselves, to be loved of God, to be the friends of Jesus, no matter what, that we are forgiven, we know that we have worth. We can find that sense of self-worth where we are still our own friends. I have another fun story. This is a story about a family that was infighting, and I might have told this one before because it is a favorite to me, but there's an author who talks about this. I think his name is Gary Smalley, and he talks about this family that was just fighting and fighting and fighting. The teenage girl was fighting with her mom, and the teenage boy was fighting with his dad, and everybody was fighting with each other, but they decided to go on a camping trip. And they went out on this camping trip, and they were away from the trappings of home, the things like homework and housework and everything else. And they were in a tent. And it was almost like it became, instead of them against each other, there was a moment when the bear came around and tried to steal their dinner off the picnic table. And it became them working together against the elements of nature that would try to threaten them. Isn't that an interesting analogy, an opportunity for us to understand that it's not always having to be us against each other, but we can turn our focus and realize that we can band together against the forces that would tear us apart instead. This is an important time to be thinking about such things. I want to leave you today with this loving kindness meditation. It's something that I've been practicing for myself for about 10 years now. It's called a loving kindness meditation, and I would invite you, we're going to do it in 3 ways, and I'm going to tell you the focus each time. The first time, I want you to focus on yourself. I want you to accept these words for yourself. So if you would, close your eyes. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be healthy and free from pain. May you be peaceful and safe. May you be happy and at ease. As we participated in this practice this morning at the 8:30 service, there was one individual who had been in some pain and said that they found they were no longer in pain. I hope that those kinds of miraculous healings are present to us all the time. I love in particular that line about being at ease. For someone who's always in motion, to be at ease is a great peace for me. I wonder what's peaceful for you. So, the second one, what we do is we take and we focus on someone who we love. Someone who might be a family member or a partner, someone who might be a good friend. Let's think about it again for them. May they be filled with loving kindness. May they be happy and healthy and free from pain. May they be peaceful and safe. May they be happy and at ease. I hope you all feel the warm embrace of that one. Finally, the last one is to think of someone with whom you may be at odds. Someone who might be a thorn in your side, someone who you know you might be aggravating. Think of someone like that. And let's do it one last time. May they be filled with loving kindness. May they be healthy and free from pain. May they be peaceful and safe. they be happy and at ease. You may have noticed within the passage that Kelly read from John that Jesus says, "These things are given to us in a spirit of joy, that our joy may be complete." I hope that's true for you. I hope that you can find a way this week to be a friend to someone, to cultivate a relationship that you have, and to find God's joy. Thanks be to God for this indescribable gift. Amen.